Some of the most dangerous people you'll ever meet won't raise their voice, won't threaten you, and might even seem like the kindest souls in the room. They'll smile, they'll listen, and they'll make you feel seen, until one day you wake up drained, confused, and doubting your own worth. That's the thing about darkness. It doesn't always come with a warning. In the teachings of the Buddha, we're reminded again and again, not every person is meant to walk beside you. Some carry karma that disturbs your peace, not because you've done anything wrong, but because their presence pulls you out of alignment with your path. Today, we're going to explore the signs, clear, sometimes hidden, of people who are not just difficult but deeply harmful to your inner peace. This video isn't about judgment, it's about wisdom. It's about using Buddhist insight to recognize when a connection is costing you more than it's giving you. So if you've ever felt confused by someone's behavior, torn between compassion and self-preservation, this is for you. And if you find value in what we're building here, a space grounded in peace, clarity, and the teachings of the Buddha, there's a simple free favor I'd love for you to do. Just hit the subscribe button. It helps this message reach more hearts. And please don't skip a second of this video. Every moment holds something that could protect your mind, your energy, and your spiritual path. Sign 1. Charm used as a mask. They walk into the room and suddenly everything seems brighter. They know how to make you laugh, remember the little things you mention in passing, and always seem to say the right words at just the right moment. In the beginning, you feel lucky, like you've met someone who really gets you. You might even find yourself telling others how special they are, how effortless it feels to be around them. But as time passes, a strange unease starts to creep in. You notice how conversations always come back to them, how they interrupt or overshadow others, and how your own voice seems to shrink when they're around. It's not always dramatic. It's subtle, just enough to make you question your instincts. This is where the Buddha's teaching on mindfulness becomes so powerful. He taught us not just to be aware of our breath or our steps, but also of the people we share our path with. The Buddha once said, "A person is not noble if they injure living beings. Such a one is called noble because they are harmless towards all living things." In modern life, harm doesn't always come with shouting or violence. Sometimes it's quiet, hidden behind charm, masked as attention. A person who seeks constant admiration, who thrives on being the center of every gathering, who subtly puts others down to lift themselves up. This isn't harmless. It's a form of spiritual disturbance. And when we're not paying attention, we absorb it. We start to see ourselves through their lens. When they praise us, we feel worthy. When they ignore us, we feel invisible. That's not peace, that's dependency. In Buddhism, one of the most overlooked forms of suffering is the suffering that arises when we confuse attachment with connection. A charming person who doesn't respect your boundaries or silence, who needs constant affirmation, is not truly connecting with you. They are feeding on your energy. They are not present with you. They are performing for validation. And as the Buddha taught, true presence doesn't need a spotlight. True presence listens as much as it speaks. It uplifts without overshadowing. It honors the shared space rather than dominating it. Pay attention to how this person behaves when others shine. Do they encourage it? Or do they subtly bring the attention back to themselves? Do they share space in conversation? Or do they treat every discussion as an opportunity to outshine others? These small details matter because they reveal the state of someone's mind. A person at peace doesn't crave constant admiration. A person grounded in virtue doesn't need to perform. And the ones who do, more often than not, are hiding something behind their charm. There's nothing wrong with being charismatic. Buddhism doesn't teach us to be dull or disengaged. But charisma without compassion, without humility, without awareness, that's not light, it's distraction. And sometimes it's deception. When someone consistently makes you feel small, overlooked or silenced, that's not your friend. That's not your teacher. That's someone using your energy for their gain. And the Buddha was clear. We must walk with wise companions. He said, admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of the holy life. Sign 2. Absence of empathy. There's something deeply unsettling about opening your heart to someone and realizing they don't seem to feel anything in return. You could be in pain, pouring out something vulnerable, hoping for just a little warmth or understanding, and what you get instead is cold silence, mockery, or worse, indifference. It's a wound that doesn't bleed on the outside, but inside, it cuts deep. What makes it even more confusing is that we live in a world where empathy is often faked. Someone can say all the right things. I'm here for you. That must be hard. But if you pay close attention, the tone is empty, the energy is detached. And in time, their actions always tell the truth. The Buddha spoke often of compassion, not as something ornamental or poetic, but as a way of life. He taught that to live wisely is to recognize that all beings suffer, and to respond to that suffering not with cold analysis, but with open-hearted care. A person who lacks empathy, on the other hand, can't meet you there. They don't connect with your joys or your struggles. They don't reflect your emotional reality. They deflect it. If you're sad, they get irritated. If you're happy, they downplay it or shift the spotlight to themselves. It's not that they don't hear you, it's that your inner world doesn't register as important to them. And the more you interact with them, the more invisible you start to feel. This disconnection isn't just painful, it's destabilizing. Because deep down, as human beings, we're wired for connection. In Buddhism, empathy is closely tied to karuna, the compassionate desire to relieve the suffering of others. Without that, relationships become one-sided, draining, and even harmful to your spirit. Think about it. What happens when you celebrate something meaningful, like a new job, a creative breakthrough, or even a moment of personal clarity, and the person closest to you barely reacts, or worse, shifts the conversation back to themselves? Over time, you stop sharing. You begin shrinking yourself to fit their emotional limitations, and that shrinking can be hard to notice because it happens so gradually. But the Buddha warned about exactly this kind of slow, subtle suffering. He said, if you light a lamp for someone else, it will also brighten your path. That's empathy. That's presence. A person without empathy not only fails to light your path, they might even snuff out your light, just so theirs can seem brighter. And it doesn't stop at emotional conversations. Lack of empathy shows up in daily behaviors, in how someone treats strangers, how they react when others are in pain, how they respond to inconvenience. You might notice they never hold the door, never thank a waiter, never show basic courtesy unless there's something in it for them. Or maybe they love to talk about themselves, but glaze over when someone else shares. It seems like a small thing until you realize it's a pattern. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. This kind of person doesn't just lack empathy, they lack spiritual depth. Because the teachings of the Buddha make one thing very clear. True wisdom is never separated from compassion. The two walk hand in hand. Now here's what makes this especially dangerous. People who lack empathy often make you feel like the problem. If you bring up your feelings, they might say you're too sensitive. If you express hurt, they act like you're overreacting. And slowly their lack of care becomes your inner self-doubt. This is why Buddhist practice emphasizes self-awareness. When you cultivate mindfulness, you start to notice not just how others treat you, but how you feel around them. Do you feel seen? Do you feel supported? Do you feel safe to be your full self? If the answer is no, that's not a flaw in your heart. That's a signal from your intuition. Sign 3. Manipulation disguised as care. They don't raise their voice. They don't force you. In fact, they make you feel like every decision is yours. But somehow, you keep second-guessing yourself. You feel guilty for saying no. You feel uneasy when you make choices without checking in with them. You're not being supported, you're being steered. That's the subtle art of manipulation. It doesn't always show up as loud control. Sometimes it's dressed in kindness, cloaked in care, and wrapped in just enough affection to make you believe you're being loved. But slowly, your confidence fades, your clarity dissolves, and your life starts revolving around someone else's needs. From a Buddhist perspective, this kind of dynamic isn't just emotionally harmful. It pulls you off your path, away from your center, and into the illusion of attachment. The Buddha taught us to see clearly, to observe without clinging, without aversion. He spoke often about the right view, the ability to discern what is real from what is distorted. When someone is manipulating you, they are essentially pulling you away from the right view. They distort reality, twist your words, shift blame, and often make you question your own memory or perception. It's like being caught in a fog. You know something's off, but you can't quite name it. That's because manipulation isn't always aggressive. It's psychological, emotional, and it works best when you're someone who naturally leads with compassion. Manipulators often seek out kind-hearted people, knowing they're more likely to forgive, to excuse, to explain away red flags. One of the most common tactics is guilt tripping. A friend might say, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me." A partner might insist, "If you really loved me, you'd understand." These phrases are meant to confuse your moral compass. They weaponize your empathy and use it to control your actions. Buddhism encourages compassion. Yes, but not the kind that sacrifices your integrity or mental well-being. True compassion, as the Buddha taught, includes yourself. It means recognizing when your kindness is being exploited and having the wisdom to set boundaries, even when it's uncomfortable. Another manipulative tactic is gaslighting. This is when someone makes you question your reality. They deny things they said, twist events, or tell you you're overreacting, even when your feelings are completely valid. Over time, this chips away at your self-trust. You begin to rely on them to define what's real, what's acceptable, what's true. In Buddhist teachings, our minds are seen as the source of our suffering, but also our liberation. If someone is constantly polluting your mind with confusion and doubt, they are interfering with your path to inner peace. The Buddha reminded us to guard our minds like a fortress. That means not allowing someone else's distortions to become your truth. Flattery is another tool manipulators use. They may praise you excessively, especially when they want something. They know how to make you feel important until you say no. Then the warmth vanishes. True support doesn't disappear when you assert your needs. In Buddhism, consistency of character is a sign of integrity. Someone who only shows kindness when it benefits them is not living from a place of compassion, but from calculation. Their intentions are rooted in self-gain, not mutual respect. Sometimes manipulation goes even deeper, into isolation. A manipulative person might say, "Your friends don't really understand you like I do," or "Your family doesn't want what's best for you." Slowly, they become your only source of validation. This is deeply dangerous. Buddhism teaches that we are interconnected beings, that community is a source of strength. Any person who tries to separate you from your support system is acting against that truth. They don't want connection, they want control. Sign 4. Controlling behavior hidden in love. Sometimes the people who say, "I love you" the loudest are the same ones who try to take away your freedom. At first it might look like care. They want to know where you're going, who you're with, what time you'll be home. They say things like, "I'm just worried," or "It's because I love you." And maybe part of you believes that, because we're taught to associate attention with affection. But Buddhist wisdom invites us to go deeper. The Buddha taught that love in its purest form is freeing. It's non-attached. It supports your growth and honors your path, not controls it. So when someone starts crossing boundaries under the guise of love, it's not really love you're experiencing, it's fear, dressed up to look like devotion. Control can show up in such subtle ways that we don't even notice it at first. Maybe you have a friend who always decides where to go, what to do, and how long to stay. You go along with it because you want to keep the peace, but slowly your preferences start disappearing, your voice becomes quieter, and eventually you stop expressing your needs altogether. In relationships, this control can become even more intense. A partner might want access to your phone, monitor your social media, or criticize the people you spend time with. They may insist that they just care too much, but caring does not equal possession. According to Buddhist philosophy, clinging, whether to people, things, or ideas, leads to suffering, and trying to own someone is one of the deepest forms of clinging there is. Buddhism teaches that true love is rooted in metta, or loving kindness. It means wishing well for another, not trying to manage or mold them. When someone begins to control your choices, it's not because they're more committed, it's because they are attached to an idea of who you should be. That attachment becomes a prison, both for them and for you. The Buddha warned against mistaking craving for connection. He taught that clinging, tanha, is the root of suffering and that liberation comes from releasing our grip, not tightening it. A person who truly cares about you will want to see you flourish, even if that means letting you make your own decisions, take your own risks, and learn your own lessons. What makes control so dangerous is how easily it can be mistaken for love. The controller often plays the role of protector, making you feel that without them, you'd fall apart. But that's not support. That's dependency. And Buddhism teaches us that dependency leads to imbalance. The path to inner peace requires self-trust, self-awareness, and the ability to make choices without fear of punishment or guilt. When someone starts punishing you emotionally, through silent treatments, guilt-tripping, or threats, they are not protecting you. They are destabilizing you to make themselves feel more secure. In many teachings, the Buddha emphasized the importance of Sangha, a supportive, nurturing community. Real connection uplifts. It creates space, not suffocation. So if you find yourself constantly second-guessing your decisions, walking on eggshells, or giving up parts of yourself just to keep the peace, ask yourself, is this relationship helping me grow, or is it shrinking me? And here's what's most important. You don't have to earn your right to autonomy. You don't need to justify your independence to anyone. You are allowed to have privacy, preferences, and personal power, even in close relationships. The Buddha didn't teach us to isolate ourselves, but he did teach us to be discerning, to protect our mind like we would protect a sacred temple. If someone's love starts feeling like a cage, that's your signal, not to fight them, but to return to yourself. Sign 5. Deception as a lifestyle. It's not just the big betrayals that unravel your trust, it's the tiny lies, the ones that sound harmless, the ones that come with a smile, the ones you want to believe because the truth would hurt more. And yet, when lies become a person's way of life, when dishonesty is their default, not their exception, it's not a flaw, it's a danger. In Buddhism, truth is not simply about facts, it's about alignment. The Buddha taught that right speech is part of the Noble Eightfold Path, and that includes being truthful, not just to others, but to ourselves. Because when someone constantly lies, they're not just deceiving you, they're reshaping your reality. And that kind of distortion isn't just confusing, it's spiritually toxic. When you're around someone who lies often, you start second-guessing everything. Not just their words, but your own memory, your own intuition. You replay conversations, wondering what was real and what was crafted. Over time, this can wear down even the strongest mind. You feel off balance, not because you've done something wrong, but because someone else is twisting the ground beneath your feet. The Buddha warned against this very kind of delusion. In the Dhammapada, he said, "Speak the truth, do not yield to anger. Give, if you are asked for little. By these 3 conditions one goes near to the gods." Notice how truth comes first, because without it, nothing else holds. A pathological liar doesn't just tell stories to entertain, They lie to manipulate outcomes, to gain control, or to escape accountability. They'll rewrite events to make themselves the hero or the victim. They'll deny things they said moments ago, and if you question them, they'll twist it until you're the one who feels guilty. This kind of behavior is a spiritual trap, because it lures you into a cycle of confusion, apology, and emotional exhaustion. And the more you try to find the truth in their stories, the further you drift from your own peace. But Buddhism gives us a powerful teaching here. Don't chase the lie. Come back to clarity. Come back to presence. The Buddha didn't spend time arguing with deceit. He observed, he spoke the truth, and he moved forward. That's the practice, not to lose yourself in proving someone wrong, but to root yourself so deeply in your own truth that no lie can shake you. If someone repeatedly lies to you, no matter how small the lies seem, that's not a small problem, that's a sign of deep spiritual disconnection. And you don't need to justify staying close to someone just because you've known them a long time, or because they occasionally show kindness. Buddha reminds us that wisdom is choosing what supports our path, not what distracts from it. You might feel compassion for the liar, you might think they must be hurting, and that might be true. But your compassion doesn't have to come at the cost of your clarity. You can wish them healing from a distance. You can set firm boundaries that protect your peace. Because being around someone who lies habitually means constantly protecting your heart, your mind, your reality. And that's not peace. That's survival. Bonus: setting boundaries as a form of compassion. Most people think compassion means saying yes, agreeing, enduring, staying silent for the sake of peace. But that's not what true compassion looks like, not according to the Buddha. Compassion isn't about allowing yourself to be walked on. It's not about tolerating mistreatment or sacrificing your well-being to keep others comfortable. The Buddha taught that compassion begins with oneself. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and the other person is to draw a clear line. A line that says, "This is where my peace ends, and I will not let your actions cross it." Think about how many times you've held back your truth to avoid conflict, how many moments you've spent uncomfortable, disrespected, or emotionally exhausted just to preserve a relationship. Buddhism reminds us that clinging, whether to people, expectations, or the idea that we must always be agreeable, is the root of suffering. And one of the most subtle forms of clinging is this belief that we have to keep giving, even when it hurts. But the Dharma doesn't teach us to abandon ourselves in the name of kindness. It teaches us balance, the middle way. And that includes knowing when to say enough. When you set a boundary, you're not rejecting a person. You're honoring the truth of your experience. You're saying, "I value this connection, but I cannot sacrifice my peace for it." And in Buddhism, this is deeply aligned with the right intention. Because when your intention is rooted in clarity, not anger, not punishment, you're acting from a place of wisdom. You're not trying to change or control the other person. You're simply choosing to protect your mind, your energy, and your path. Some people might not understand your boundaries. They might call you selfish, cold, difficult, but that's only because they benefited from your lack of limits. Buddha never said this journey would be easy. He spoke often about how clinging to comfort, avoiding discomfort, and fearing disapproval can keep us trapped. But the moment we begin to choose self-respect over people-pleasing, everything changes. You start walking the Eightfold Path, not just in meditation, but in every decision you make. Boundaries are also a form of mindfulness. They require presence. You have to be aware of how a relationship makes you feel, how certain conversations leave your body tense, how certain people drain you, confuse you, or belittle you, sometimes subtly, sometimes loudly. And when you become mindful of these patterns, you gain the power to respond instead of react. That's the gift of awareness. It doesn't numb you, it sharpens your insight. Now let's talk about the guilt that often shows up. You might feel bad for needing space, for saying no, for stepping back. But remember what the Buddha taught. You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. Your peace is not a luxury, it's your foundation. Without it, you cannot walk the path clearly. Without it, your compassion becomes martyrdom, your kindness becomes self-erasure, and your spirit becomes tired. That's not what the Buddha wanted for you. That's not liberation. That's entrapment disguised as virtue. And here's something beautiful. When you set boundaries from a place of calm and truth, you also give others permission to do the same. You model what self-compassion looks like. You teach, not through preaching but through living, that peace is sacred and we are allowed to protect it. That relationship should uplift, not deplete. That connection without respect is not love, it's attachment. Some people enter our lives to teach us love, others to teach us strength, but the most important lesson is this: you are not here to be drained, diminished, or broken. You are here to awaken, to walk in peace, to rise with clarity, and to love yourself enough to let go of anything that threatens your light. If this message spoke to your heart, there's more waiting for you. Just click on one of the videos on the screen. And from my heart to yours, thank you for being a part of Buddhist journey. May your path be steady, your mind be calm, and your spirit stay free.